On the morning of March 2nd, 1978, at approximately 7:13 hours, Franklin County Sheriff's Deputy Thomas R. Leland responded to a call from sanitation worker Clifford Jarvis. Jarvis had reported an object partially submerged in a drainage ditch off Interstate 270, about 2 miles south of the E Main Street exit. Upon arrival, Leland found the lifeless body of a young woman, clothed and waterlogged, face up in the cold water left behind by overnight rain. The victim's hair, distinct auburn, 14 inches in length, floated around her pale face. She wore a denim jacket, light green sweater, and tan corduroy trousers. Despite the water, no evidence of sexual assault was immediately visible. The victim's wrists and ankles showed deep ligature marks, and a single bruise encircled her neck, a dark ring that spoke of prolonged compression. Her fingernails were broken, with dirt and beige synthetic fibers embedded beneath the left index nail. The discovery was documented carefully: photographs, sketch maps, and scene measurements. Leland noted the scene's eerie calm. No personal items were recovered. No witnesses came forward. By mid-afternoon, the Franklin County Coroner's Office confirmed the deceased as Denise Marie Harrow, aged 18. Denise had been reported missing on February 27th by her roommate at Ohio State University. She was last seen at approximately 2100 hours, leaving a study group at Thompson Library. Friends described Denise as reserved, meticulous, and wary of strangers. She was known to avoid walking alone at night, preferring rides from trusted friends. Her wallet was found 3 blocks from campus, missing cash but with credit cards left behind. The following day, the preliminary autopsy confirmed death by manual strangulation, with ligature compression as a complicating factor. Dr. Alice P. Rosenbaum, the attending pathologist, placed the time of death between 48 to 72 hours prior to discovery. No drugs or alcohol were found in Denise's blood. 3 ribs on the right side were fractured, and contusions to her upper arms indicated a struggle. Dr. Rosenbaum's report also noted the synthetic fiber beneath the victim's nail, matching upholstery fabric used in 1970s American-made vehicles. Detectives interviewed Denise's classmates and professors. No one recalled seeing her leave with anyone. Investigators considered the possibility of an abduction by someone posing as an authority figure, a tactic used by offenders who could bypass a cautious victim's natural defenses. On May 17, 1978, a jogger discovered the body of Martha Lynn Coleman, aged 19, near Alum Creek Park, approximately 12 miles northeast of Columbus. Weather at the time was clear, with temperatures around 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Martha's body was found face down, partially concealed by brush and fallen branches. She wore a white peasant blouse and blue jeans, both garments torn at the seams. Her wrists and ankles bore ligature marks. Her neck showed deep circular bruising, consistent with a thin cord or wire. Like Denise, Martha had auburn hair. She was last seen leaving work at Norman's Diner on May 14, 1978, around 2300 hours. Witnesses said she appeared untroubled. Her vehicle was discovered the next morning, keys still in the ignition, driver's door ajar. Martha's friends described her as cautious, wary of walking alone after dark. In the weeks before her death, she had expressed concerns about being watched during her late shifts. Evidence began to suggest a link. Fibers identical to those found in Denise's fingernail were recovered from the hem of Martha's blouse. The pattern emerged: young women with auburn hair, cautious but snared by deception, found in remote or hidden locations, all within 15 miles of Columbus. In the months that followed, the pattern continued. In July, Shelby Ann Lockhart, age 20, was found concealed under a mattress in an abandoned motel. In September, Emily Rachel Donnelly, age 21, was discovered in a farmer's field, her hair matted with mud, her body left as if discarded. By early October 1978, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office had assembled a task force. Public advisories were issued, and women with auburn hair were urged to avoid traveling alone. But no suspect emerged, and no witness ever saw the killer. The Auburn Murders, as they became known, faded from headlines by year's end, overshadowed by other events. The file was closed, the case cold, and the city moved on. Or so it seemed. 30 years after the final victim was laid to rest, the Auburn murders had receded from the public mind. The file was marked inactive and sat undisturbed in the cold case archives of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office until March 2nd, 2008, the precise anniversary of Denise Marie Harrow's discovery. Detective Mark A. Sanderson, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for meticulous work, had just transferred into the newly expanded cold case unit. His task, to review forgotten files, seeking overlooked evidence in the wake of advances in DNA technology. The Auburn murders had always intrigued him. 4 young women, all with auburn hair, all found strangled and abandoned in secluded areas. A single cigarette butt and a partial boot print were the only promising leads that had never been fully exploited. That morning, a letter arrived at the sheriff's office, postmarked from Cleveland. It was addressed simply, Cold Case Files, Auburn. No return address, no sender name. The letter was short and typed, its language direct and unsettling. The killer you never found still walks free. You missed the clue that was always there. The paper was yellowed with ink slightly blurred by moisture, but the message was chillingly clear. Sanderson, intrigued by the date and the claim, ordered the letter secured in evidence and immediately reopened the Auburn file. He noted the unsettling precision of the letter's timing, exactly 30 years after the discovery of the first victim. Reviewing the old evidence logs, he discovered the cigarette butt and boot print, cast taken from the Emily Donnelly scene, had never been tested for DNA. An omission that had once been understandable, but was now a glaring oversight. The beige synthetic fibers, repeatedly found on the victim's clothes, were re-examined as well. For Sanderson, it was more than a cold case. It was a riddle long overlooked. He ordered DNA testing on the cigarette butt and a reanalysis of the fibers, along with any other preserved trace evidence. He also revisited every original statement and scene photograph, hoping to find what the letter implied, a clue that had always been there. But in the weeks that followed, Sanderson grew increasingly troubled. No suspect had ever been identified or even seriously considered in the original files, despite 5 detailed behavioral profiles compiled by the Behavioral Science Unit in the late 1970s. Witness accounts were vague, usually describing a clean-cut man in a tan or beige sedan, common enough in an era of generic cars and trusting college towns. The letter's origin nagged at him. Who would know about these murders in such detail and remain silent for 3 decades? More chilling still, if the claim was true, then the killer had outlived the case file, undetected and possibly still at large. As the testing results loomed, Sanderson felt the weight of the letter's final sentence pressing on him like a vice. You missed the clue that was always there. He was determined not to miss it again. Weeks later, the lab results arrived. DNA was extracted from the cigarette butt found near Emily Donnelly's body. It yielded a partial profile, male, type O blood, a genetic fingerprint that in the late 1970s would have been impossible to obtain. It was not a match to anyone in the national database, but it confirmed that the cigarette had been smoked by the killer. Sanderson focused next on the boot print. Using modern imaging software, technicians enhanced the cast's worn edges and identified it as a men's Red Wing boot, size 10.5, manufactured between 1976 and 1978. The detail was tantalizing. The print had been made in soft earth, 15 feet from Donnelly's final resting place, near tire tracks leading back to the highway. Sanderson cross-referenced the boot size and fiber matches with known patterns of abduction. He compiled a short list of men arrested for impersonating police officers in central Ohio during the late 1970s. A behavioral pattern matching the original profile's suggestion that the killer used authority to gain victims' trust. Then a fragment of a police report caught his attention. In 1972, a man named Russell Wayne Eldred had been charged, though never convicted, for impersonating an officer. He owned a tan sedan and had lived alone near Reynoldsburg. His file was thin, his name forgotten by most, but the match was too strong to ignore. Digging deeper, Sanderson found that Eldred had died in 1993. No DNA had ever been collected at the time of his death. However, the letter's suggestion, "You missed the clue that was always there," seemed to point directly to him. Eldred's known behavior, vehicle ownership, and physical description matched the surviving witness report from Carla Simmons. Was it a confession from beyond the grave? Or had someone else known about Eldred's activities all along, waiting for the chance to reveal the truth? The answers lay in the evidence, and Sanderson was determined to find them. Sanderson requested Eldred's archived property records and traced ownership of the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme he once drove. Maintenance records confirmed repairs to the passenger door in late 1978, consistent with Carla Simmons' escape. The vehicle had long been scrapped, but a single police evidence photograph from the impound lot revealed a torn piece of upholstery, beige and synthetic, that matched the fiber found on the victim's clothing. The revelation was profound. Eldred had eluded justice in life, but the evidence spoke clearly in death. Still, the letter remained a mystery. No fingerprints, no forensics, just a deliberate message. The timing, so precise, raised unsettling questions. Sanderson reread the note countless times, its cryptic final line echoing in his mind. "You missed the clue that was always there." He wondered if the letter was meant to suggest that Eldred had not acted alone. Compelling every lead and witness statement, Sanderson created a detailed timeline of Eldred's movements in the late 1970s. There were gaps, periods when Eldred's location was unverified. More disturbingly, police files from that time hinted at a second man seen with a tan sedan near the abduction sites, but never positively identified. Had there been an accomplice, a copycat, or someone else who watched from the shadows, content to let Eldred bear the weight of guilt? Sanderson reached out to Carla Simmons, the only known survivor, who now lived in California. She confirmed the man in the car was Eldred, his face burned into her memory. Yet she also recalled a chilling detail. As she fled, she glimpsed another figure in the back seat, someone she could not describe, but whose presence still haunted her. The letter's author seemed to know everything. Sanderson was convinced they had been there, watching all along. He had no name, no face. But he was out there, someone who knew every detail of the Auburn murders and had waited 30 years to remind the world that the case was not as closed as it seemed. The new lead forced Sanderson to reconsider everything. Carla's fleeting glimpse of a second figure and the letter's ominous message suggested the Auburn murders might never have been the work of a lone predator. Digging through old case files, he discovered a forgotten note from 1978. An unnamed witness, a gas station attendant, reported seeing a tan sedan parked along Refugee Road on the night Emily Donnelly disappeared. The attendant recalled two men arguing in low voices near the car. The report had been dismissed at the time, overshadowed by the more dramatic witness accounts of a single driver. Sanderson contacted the gas station, which miraculously still operated under the same family ownership. The current manager found an old payroll ledger that listed an employee from that era, Henry Hank Stinson. Now in his 70s and living in Dayton, Stinson agreed to meet Sanderson. Over coffee in a dim diner, Stinson recalled that night in surprising detail. "There was a lot of confusion," he said. "I saw two men. One looked clean-cut, average height, wore a tan jacket. The other guy stayed in the shadows. He was taller, broad-shouldered, didn't say a word." Sanderson pressed him. "You're sure there were two men?" "I'm sure," Stinson said. "The quiet one, he just stood there, watching." The description, tall, broad, silent, didn't match Eldred. It was a new figure in a narrative thought long settled. Returning to the letter, Sanderson read it again. "You missed the clue that was always there." It wasn't just about Eldred. It was about the man in the shadows, the one no one had pursued. This second figure was never formally identified or sought after the panic of Eldred's arrest. Sanderson reviewed composite sketches and surviving witness statements. Carla's recollection of a second figure, she'd never been fully believed. But Stinson's corroboration, 3 decades later, changed that. There had always been a second man. His name had been lost in the panic of 1978, buried in an investigation that had moved too quickly to close the case. The realization tightened Sanderson's resolve. He would track down the man in the shadows. If Eldred had been the face of the Auburn murders, this second figure had been its silent partner, its ghost. In the cold case unit's dark evidence room, surrounded by the haunting photographs of 4 auburn-haired victims, Sanderson began a new search. It was no longer about solving an old case. It was about stopping a killer who might still be alive and watching. With renewed determination, Sanderson focused on identifying the man in the shadows. He pulled every archived report of suspicious activity near the original crime scenes, loitering complaints, late-night prowlers, traffic stops that never led to charges. He searched for a pattern: men with a history of impersonation, a tendency to remain hidden, or known associates of Eldred. In the dusty archives, he found an arrest record from 1979 for a John Jack Mallory, then 32, who had been detained briefly for trespassing near the abandoned Brookview Motel, the same location where Shelby Lockhart's body was found. At the time, the arrest was dismissed as unrelated. Mallory claimed he was just exploring, and with Eldred already in custody, no further investigation was conducted. But Mallory matched Stinson's description: tall, broad-shouldered, and habitually silent in interactions. Sanderson tracked Mallory's last known address to a small town in northern Ohio. The trail was cold. Mallory had left the area in the mid-1980s. He had no surviving relatives in Columbus, and no fingerprints were on record. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. Sanderson requested assistance from federal databases, cross-referencing Mallory's name with employment records and vehicle registrations. After weeks of searching, he found a match. Mallory had resurfaced in 2002 under a new name, Jonathan Malden, working as a security guard in Cleveland. His job history was littered with gaps: always night work, always transient. A search of his employment file revealed more. In 2004, Malden had been cited for unauthorized access to a closed construction site in Cleveland. He claimed he was performing a security sweep, but no contract existed for the property. His file described him as polite, cooperative, but evasive when pressed for details. Sanderson knew he had the second hunter. While Eldred's death in 1993 had ended one chapter of the Auburn Murders, Mallory, now Malden, had slipped through the cracks. The letter's arrival from Cleveland, its timing and precision, now seemed more than a taunt. It was a warning from the killer himself, or from someone who had witnessed it all and could no longer stay silent. Sanderson prepared to travel to Cleveland. He would need to confront Malden directly, to see the face of the man who had eluded justice for 30 years. The weight of the old case bore down on him as he packed his files. In the silent evidence room, he paused by the photographs of the victims. He promised them he would see this through to the end. On November 3, 2008, Detective Mark Sanderson arrived in Cleveland with the files that had haunted him for months. He located Jonathan Malden's residence, a modest duplex on the city's east side. Neighbors described Malden as quiet and polite, always wearing a uniform even off-duty, blending in seamlessly with the suburban calm. Sanderson waited until Malden left for his overnight security shift, then knocked on the door of the property manager. She confirmed Malden had lived there for nearly 6 years, never causing trouble, never missing rent. To her, he was just another tenant, unremarkable and invisible. But Sanderson knew better. He visited Malden's workplace, a deserted industrial park monitored by a single security booth. Malden was there, alone as always, leaning against the wall in the flickering yellow light of the lot. His face was pale, his build as broad and imposing as the shadows that surrounded him. "Mr. Malden," Sanderson said, introducing himself as a detective from Columbus, "I'm investigating some old cases. I'd like to speak with you about your past." Malden's expression was calm, almost amused. "Columbus? That was a long time ago," he said softly. "I'm not sure I can help you." "I think you can," Sanderson replied. "Your name used to be Mallory. You were seen near a crime scene in 1979. 4 young women, each with auburn hair, died back then. Russell Wayne Eldred took the blame. But there were always rumors about a second man." Malden's eyes narrowed. "You've been digging a long time, detective," he said, his tone measured. "But those cases are closed. Your suspect is dead." Sanderson held up the letter that had reopened everything. "Did you write this?" Malden didn't flinch. "Why would I write a letter like that? Those girls were dead before I ever heard their names," Sanderson pressed. "Then why were you at Brookview Motel in 1979? Why were you seen with Eldred's car? Why did you hide your identity for 30 years? Malden gave a thin smile. "Maybe I was curious. Maybe I was there for something else. You can't prove what I did or didn't do, detective. No one can. The conversation ended with no confession, no slip of the tongue, but Sanderson saw it in his eyes, a glint of something that spoke of dark knowledge and deeper truths. Malden had been there. Whether he had killed or only watched, he was part of the Auburn murders. Back in Columbus, Sanderson compiled everything. Malden's alias, his presence at the scenes, the details only the letter's author could have known. But there was no physical evidence left to tie him to the murders. No DNA, no fibers, no fingerprints that survived the decades. The letter itself bore no prints, no traceable marks. In the end, Sanderson prepared a final report for the cold case unit. It documented Malden's identity and movements, outlining his likely role as an accomplice, or as the killer who had manipulated Eldred as a proxy. But without new evidence, the case would remain technically open. Officially, no charges could be filed. The file was labeled conditionally closed. Malden remained free, his shadow cast over the memory of those 4 young women. The truth would remain buried in the silence of lost time and the fear of those who had once watched from the shadows. As he closed the file, Sanderson felt the weight of all the lives touched by the Auburn murders. Victims whose names would forever be tied to a killer who vanished into the fog of memory, and a witness or partner who still walked free. He knew the faces, the dates, and the pain, but the man in the shadows remained, unseen, untouched, but never fully forgotten. And in the back of his mind, he wondered if the letter had been a final confession, or a quiet promise that the darkness would never truly die.